Hey guys, it's Brian here. New episodes of the show return on January 7th. In the meantime, we're replaying some of the best. This time, one of our most popular episodes, thanks to its no-nonsense approach to training. Brad Gill and the incredible collection of knowledge he acquired in his very first Rim to Rim to Rim. Hey there, fellow Canyon crazies. My name is Brian Special, and this is the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show presented by Bright Angel Outfitters. Okay, our guest today has an impressive resume. He ran his first marathon at 14, ran a 4-minute 25-second mile in high school, has been a U.S. champion in outrigger canoeing, yet says completing the Rim to Rim to Rim hike was harder than all of them. Well, today you're going to hear not just a training plan built around simplicity, but also the gripping story of what happened when that training plan was actually implemented in the canyon. And please know that this is the kind of plan that is not just for R3. If you're planning a rim to rim or a rim to river or any hike in the canyon really that you think requires training, this can and will help you. Not too long ago, Brad Gill posted in one of the Grand Canyon Facebook groups that he had a plan that he believed in, and if you wanted to see it, just send him a message and he'd send it to you. So I did, and when I got the plan and had a look, I just knew that I had to have Brad on the show. It's built around simplicity. It's easy to follow and easy to understand. It's based in Brad's background as a triathlete and marathon runner, which means it's heavily focused on time on your feet. So you don't need any fancy equipment or specialized terrain to follow it. And it's easy to tailor for whatever hike you're planning, from rim to river to rim, all the way up to what Brad was planning, which was rim to rim to rim. Here now is Brad's plan and Brad's story on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show presented by Bright Angel Outfitters. Brad Gill is a creative type. A lifelong resident of Southern California, he made a career of graphic design, marketing, and advertising. But when it comes to physical endeavors, Brad takes a far more analytical approach. A lifelong runner, he was a triathlete during and after college at Long Beach State, and later it was another sport, one he'd never even considered that would consume his life, after a simple invitation from a friend.
She paddled on an outrigger canoe team, and they were the world champions at the time. And she said, "Brad, you got to get into this. You would love it." And I was like, no, I'm pretty happy doing triathlons. I don't need that. And so she said, well, come out. We're having a race. The women race from Newport Beach to Catalina Island, and then the men race back the next day. So come on out, check it out. I'll put you on one of the escort boats, and you can just see for yourself. And so the races to and from Catalina they're virtually sprint races, because the outriggers are 45 feet long. They hold 6 people, and the team has 9 people. So every canoe has an escort boat that follows them. And about every 15 minutes, the escort boat jumps up ahead of the canoe and drops 3 people in the water or 2 people in the water. And the canoe comes by and people jump out, other people jump in. The canoe never stops. It just keeps going. And so it's just a constant sprint for 20, 30 minutes. And you just keep changing people the whole way across. And so I was on an escort boat watching this happen, live and up close. And I was just like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I got to get into this. So I said, but my body is built for running. It's not built for this upper body canoe stuff, this long distance canoe thing. So I said, set me up with a weight training plan for a year, and then I'll get into it. And so I did that. I lifted weights for a year that were specifically for outrigger canoeing. And then I joined a team kind of right when I was out of college, starting early in my career. This was in 1992. And I've kind of been hooked on it ever since.
It's that same pragmatic approach. Let me see how I do if I train for a year before jumping in, that Brad would use 2 years ago as he planned a Grand Canyon camping trip with some old college buddies. The plan was simply to camp on the South Rim, but then ambition took over.
A buddy of mine in this group decided that he had the idea of, hey, let's hike from the South Rim to the North Rim. That would be really fun. And it's only 20 miles, which is like the farthest I've ever hiked in my life with a pack on, is 20 miles. And that's when I was, 25. Now I'm 58, so it's going to be a different story. So I said, well, yeah, that sounds like a doable thing. I got to get in shape for that. And then we learned that during our time in the Grand Canyon that the North Rim wasn't going to be open. It opened a week after.
So with rim to rim out, and rather than take on an easier but still iconic hike like Rim to River, one of the boys suggested, you guessed it, rim to rim to rim. The vaunted double crossing, 45 plus miles with more than 20,000 feet of elevation change.
And I was just like, no way, that's a terrible idea. I'm not doing that. Knowing how far that distance is and the elevation gain and loss that you have, I said, there's no way. So after, I think, a month of thinking about it, there was going to be 3 of us that did it. My friends, Pat and Nate, they both wanted to do this trip. And so I talked to Nate kind of privately, who was the more rational of the group. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about this, and if we train for it, it might be possible to do this. Because they wanted to do it in 24 hours. And I said, that's a long haul. I've never done anything in my life that's a 24-hour thing. And the demands on your body are going to be pretty severe. So I said, I need a lot of research before we think about this, before we commit to doing it. So I did a bunch of research, mostly on YouTube, ironically. They have a lot of good information on YouTube. And I started following videos on people that did the race and how they packed and what they wore. Not a lot of training, but it's more like what they took with them. And then there's some fail videos that I found really interesting, like the people that were going to do a run or a hike and they didn't make it, and what happened. Why didn't they make it? How did they fail? And the reasons are vast. Sometimes it's we didn't have the right electrolytes and our body shut down. Sometimes it's we ate the wrong thing and our body shut down. Or the weather was just so crazy it wouldn't allow us to continue. So it's like these are all good things to learn and factor in as we're thinking about doing this. So I let my two friends know that, okay, so I can come up with a training plan for us back from my college days and my high school days when I ran a marathon. The training was very similar to how you would train. So I said, I can come up with a training program. And I said, but the caveat is I need to lose 30 pounds. I can't do this hike in my current fat weight. I need to drop weight. I need to really walk a lot. And let's train for 2 months. I'll give you the training plan, follow it, and we'll check back in 2 months and see if this is something we want to commit to. And if it's a doable thing, great, let's commit and let's go for it. And if it's not a doable thing, we're still going to get together with everybody, but we just won't be doing this hike. Or we might just hike down to the river and back, which is way easier. So we all, we all did our training, and I kind of talked to Nate, who will train. He lives in Grand Junction, but he's going to have winter weather issues that's going to hamper his training, whereas I'm in Southern California. I don't have a lot of elevation, but I have great weather. So I asked him, like, how do you think Pat is going to train? And Pat lives kind of close to me. And Nate said, no, Pat's not going to train. And he said, he's going to train like he drinks. He's going to go out hard with no pacing, and he's going to take a nap, and then he's going to be done. And so I said, yeah, that's probably true. That's probably what's going to happen. So we kind of decided that we're all 3 going to train on our own, and then we're all 3 going to hike at our own pace, whatever that means. So we're not going to stay together as a group.
The training plan was simple. You'll hear and read about more technical programs elsewhere. The one Brad came up with is built around one long weekly hike, supplemented by walking and other simple exercises like push-ups and sit-ups.
At the end of the 2 months, I said, if we can do 2 30-mile hikes or 2 35-mile hikes, we can do this. And the training plan was basically a ladder, month by month. So the first month, you would start off on a Saturday or weekend hike. You might hike 15 miles. And then the next Saturday, you might go 20 miles. And the next Saturday, you might go 25 miles. You do the ladder going up, and then when the 5th week hits, you go back down to a lower mileage, but your lower mileage is more than the first part of the ladder. So the ladder just keeps going up, it goes down, it goes up again, but you're always increasing higher and higher throughout the whole time.
So much like marathon training or half marathon training, where you have your long run on the weekend, and whatever you do during the week supplements that.
That's exactly what it was based on. When I trained for a marathon in junior high, that's exactly how we trained. If you could do a 20-mile run, you can do a 26-mile run. So this was the same philosophy. It got a little more complicated with this one, only because of gear. You know, you don't want to take too much gear, but you want to take the gear you need. Food was super important. What food are you going to be able to digest while you're under duress? And canoeing oddly helped me with that, because you have to pick the right foods that don't upset your stomach in a race, especially a long distance race. But it still gives you, it can't just be sugar. It has to be more stuff. You have to keep your electrolytes going. It has to be energy for your body. And if you're just going to eat sugar, that's not going to work for you in the long haul, and you wind up shutting down. So we talked about that. We emailed each other a lot, and we kept each other accountable every week. Like, we would post, this is what I did. So we had apps on our phone that would track, this is where I walked. And then we would record the mileage. And so I was kind of keeping track of everybody's mileage. And it was on you to do other stuff during the week, whatever you can do. We recommended lunges, stairs, anything for your quads, squats that would be good. I was doing sit-ups and push-ups. I did as many squats as I could, but I couldn't really do that many of them just because of the shape of my knees at that time. So I just did the best I could.
But there were no hard and fast rules in terms of numbers of repetitions and things like that. It was just really, again, supplementing the long time on your feet on the long weekly hike.
Yeah, it all boiled down to time on your feet. You need the miles, and nothing is going to substitute putting miles on your feet.
Thanks for making the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show the #1 Grand Canyon-related podcast in the world. We'll be back in January with a new season of tips, tricks, and most importantly, your stories about what it takes to have a successful hike in one of the most spectacular places in the world. In the meantime, the conversation never stops in our Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Facebook group, a vibrant community of canyon crazies out to help you have your best possible experience in the canyon. It's the only place you'll have daily access to Brian and just about every guest you've ever heard on the show, and they're all here to help. It's totally free, so join today and enter the world of the Canyon Obsessed.
And I learned so much during the training of the 5 months of how my body reacted to these things. So some of the training hikes, and I told everybody, wear exactly what you're going to wear in the canyon. Don't wear something different. Wear exactly what you'd wear. Hike in the shoes, hike in the socks that you're going to do. Have everything in your pack that you were going to take in the canyon. Learn how to get stuff out of your pack on the move, because it's going to be key to keep moving and not take long breaks, not to be digging in your pack every 20 minutes to change something. You have to be able to do stuff on the fly, because time is ticking when you start. And it seems like 20 or 24 hours is a long time, but when you're going that kind of a distance, it really eats up the time quickly.
Through all the preparation, Brad was careful to keep something else in mind: personality type, and more importantly, how he'd deal with that on the day of the hike. Brad was trying to leave as little to chance as possible, a smart strategy when taking on such a monumental adventure.
My friend Nate and I talked about how this was more of a business trip for us and less pleasure for the hike. And Pat is going to have more pleasure than business. And so we kind of had a dynamic offset just in our own group. And I kind of let Nate know, I said, hey, I don't want to be rude, but I'm not going to be lollygagging around. I'm going to keep moving. And if Pat wants to take a break, that's great. He can take a break. But I got to keep moving. Your body's only going to go so far. It's hard to train for a 24-hour event. So I gave them a lot of tips on, hydration, nutrition. You should be drinking a certain amount, every so often. Even if you're not thirsty, you should still be taking in that liquid. I told them one of my plans was to take Advil every 4 hours just to help with inflammation. And I relied on salt tablets to help replenish the salt in my body. So I was taking one of those like every 2 hours. And that's what I would do on my hikes just around Southern California. I learned how to take on and off a jacket, like my down jacket when I started hiking in the morning would be cold. And then I would warm up. So I'd learn how to take that jacket off, put it in my pack, and never stop walking. I learned how to take the poles off of my back because I liked hiking poles. They were a great assistance, especially uphill. But I didn't necessarily need them all the time. So how do you put the poles away? And if you stop to do all these things, that really adds up. So you want to learn how not to do that. So as everybody was kind of training, my hikes got longer and longer. A lot of times in the beginning, I would start at 6 a.m. And then as the hikes got longer, I didn't want to be finishing at sunset. I would start at 3 a.m. And then eventually my longest hikes, I started at midnight. And I learned how to hike all through the night. Eating along the way, learning what kind of foods worked, what didn't. I saw a lot of posts that people like Nutella and banana sandwiches. So I tried that one time. I didn't like it, but I tried it. Peanut butter and jelly worked for me better. You learn what kind of snacks work. There's gels, there's bars, there's goo. There's all kinds of different things. So you have to kind of try them all. And the time to try them is in your training. You don't want to try that stuff for real on the hike if you haven't used it. I found that beef jerky was great because it gave me something to chew on. It was salty. It helped replenish some salt. And so that was really great. So I kind of learned what worked and what didn't. What kind of, do you use Gatorade, or do you have fruit juice and water mixed, or do you just use water? There's all kinds of different things to try there. And it's all very personal. That's what I learned, is just because I like something doesn't mean somebody else will. So I think some of my longest hikes were from kind of this Seal Beach area in California all the way down to Dana Point, which was, I think there was one time where at the end I did a 45-mile hike where I started at midnight. I learned YouTube videos of failures. One guy talked about a specific failure when he made it from rim to rim, made it back to Phantom Ranch, and was so excited that they were open, he got a lemonade and drank a lemonade. He said it tasted amazing, which I'm sure it did. And so he got another one, and then he got a third one. And his story was going back up Bright Angel. He only made it a few miles before his stomach cramped up, and then he found himself laying in the middle of the trail, and he was stuck there for like 7 or 8 hours. He had to let his body absorb all of that sugar that he just had taken, and he couldn't move, and so he just had to wait it out before he can get himself out. So you would think that knowledge would be really valuable on my training hike, but I decided to stop at like a Shake Shack during one of my hikes and get a date shake because I was so hot. It was going to taste great. And so I drank it. It was wonderful as I kept walking. And then the same thing happened to me. And I was just like, you're an idiot. Why did you saw the video, you saw what was going to happen. You did it anyway. And now you see how your stomach feels. So the time to fail is in training. That's where you make your mistakes. Other really valuable things I found were on long hikes, I would take certain times to change my socks because fresh socks really help your feet a lot. And I learned that if I take too long, let's just say I take 15 minutes to change my socks, that 15 minutes of sitting down, adjusting your pack and changing your socks, your body doesn't really know what you're doing. It kind of thinks you're done. And so I found that my feet would swell up, my knees would get really sore because it thought I was done. And so the inflammation would set in. So I learned the hard way, don't take too long to do these things. So I had taking off my shoes, changing my socks, getting a drink. I had that down to 3 minutes. And I was back on the road, and my body didn't have a chance for the inflammation to set in. So I found that to be super valuable. Like, don't take these long breaks. You got to keep going. I learned that there's a certain point in the beginning of a hike where your body's just going to hurt. Your hip hurts, your knee hurts, you don't know why. It just does. And that goes away. And as you continue to walk, there's a certain point. For me, it was like at about the 7 or 8 mile mark, my feet would hurt. The bottom of my feet would just hurt. And so I would keep going. And then at about 12 or 15 miles, my feet would hurt more, but it would never hurt more than that time. There was just a certain amount of low-level pain for every step, and it just kind of is what it is. And I can't say it's fun, but it's all really valuable information and training, because when I actually did the hike, that same thing happened. And it's like, oh, my feet hurt. Oh, I know what this is. I've been here before. And I know it's not going to get any worse, so just forget about this and keep going. You're going to have other problems arise. So that kind of stuff is really valuable in training.
The training program lasted 5 months. All three, Brad, Nate, and Pat, were as ready as they were going to be for their hike, which would take them from South Kaibab to North Kaibab, and then back out on Bright Angel. But those personality differences, well...
Pat is kind of live by the edge of his seat kind of guy. kind of trains, kind of doesn't. Nate did some medium training. He was going to be pretty solid. I know I put in way more miles than they did, and I felt pretty confident in how far I could go. The elevation was the only killer. Nate had a lot of elevation training. I didn't have as much, and Pat had none. Pat was very much, hey, we're going to get there and we're just going to hike the next day. And I was very much against that. Nate was in agreement that he didn't want to hike the day after we got there. And so Nate and I secretly went out a day earlier and got our camp spot, because we knew Pat, when he came in, he was going to want to go the next day. And I thought, that's setting yourself up for failure. You don't have enough, you just had a long 8-hour drive. You're going to be tired. You have to get up really early. You're not going to have enough sleep. I said, that's not something I'm going to do, especially after the 5 months of training I just did. I'm not going to throw it away on that. So Nate and I got there a day early, and we rode some beach cruisers to, the South Kaibab Trail to look at, like, what does it look like in the daylight? We're going to be finishing at night, so let's ride over to the Grand Canyon Village now, because we're going to have to get back in the middle of the night. It's not going to look like it does now in the daytime. It's easy to get lost. So we're thinking of things about when we're at the end of the hike, what's going to happen? What's the environment going to be like? Our weather was going to be good. It was a little windy. Nate did something really smart. He said, I booked us a hotel room at the end of the Bright Angel Trail, like 100 yards from the trail, just in case we need it. I thought, yeah, I don't know if we're going to need it, but that's a good idea. Pat's big plan, since he was a nurse, he said, I brought IVs in case we need them at the end of the hike. And I thought, I don't know if we'll need them, but I think that's a good idea. And his girlfriend was also a nurse. So I was like, okay, we have lots of medical right there, which was good. So the morning of, we basically had a 1 a.m. start. So we all got up at midnight. I think Pat got 2 hours of sleep because he had just rolled in, late that afternoon. Nate and I had a full night's rest, so we ate breakfast. We got a ride to the South Kaibab Trail from his girlfriend. We started at, I think, 1 in the morning. It was 40-mile-an-hour winds, no moon, so it was pitch black and just cold. It had to be 32 degrees, 30 degrees. It was freezing cold. And so we all had our headlamps, full bladder of water, and we just said, okay, let's go. Clock has started now. And so we start hiking down the trail. And another important thing in training is to hike at night in training, because the first time I hiked at night on kind of a hilly trail, I learned my headlamp wasn't bright enough and I needed more light. And so it's like, okay, I'm glad I learned this here instead of out there. So I got a brighter headlight. We found that like 600 lumens is usually enough to have at least that much. So we all had our headlights marching down. Pat had a good idea. He brought little flashing red lights that are on bicycles, and he put them on the back of our backpacks. So at night, if you saw a flashing red light, you knew that was one of us, because we weren't going to stay together. We were going to be basically separating at some point. And so when some people got ahead, I can look down the switchback and say, oh yeah, Nate's over there. I can see the flashing light. Because there's no moon, there's no way I would have seen him otherwise. It was a little sketchy on the start because the wind was so fierce. And, there's no guardrail on the trail. You have a cliff on one side and you have a black hole on the other side. So we wanted to be really focused on don't get hurt ever, but don't get hurt now especially, because the potential for getting hurt is huge if you make a wrong step or lose your balance. There's nothing to stop you from sliding down the canyon. It was steep, way steeper than I thought it was going to be going down. And I just remember as we're hiking, just like, wow, my knees are taking a pounding. My quads are really burning. But we're just going to power through. And it's only 6 miles. Another thing that I'm thankful I did in this whole adventure was I broke the distance up into short increments. So I made myself a really tiny map that I just attached to my backpack by a clip. And the map had what the next thing was on the trail. And so I basically broke the entire trail down into 1 mile to 3 mile segments. And so I never really thought, oh, I'm hiking 47 miles. It's like, what's the next waypoint on my map? That's Skeleton Point. That's 1.5 miles away. Okay, I just got to go to Skeleton Point. And then it's like, okay, now you go to the next point. And then the next point's the river. Okay, now I'm at the bridge. That's only another mile away. So the entire thing was broken up that way. So mentally, that was a big help to break it up into small sections, because then you're always just like, I only got to go a mile. I only got to go 2 miles. So we made our way down to the river, and the wind was still howling, and I was very surprised that my legs were shaking. My quads were just on fire. And it's kind of that when your body is so fatigued in a run that your legs just have this uncontrollable shaking. That's what mine were doing. And I was thinking, like, 6 miles in, that's not a good place to be. I got a long way to go. And I know the next 7 miles are going to be fairly flat. So I'm hoping I can shake this out, because the next part of the hiking won't be this stressful on your body. So, and true to form, Pat wanted to stop, get pictures and by the river. And so I was like, okay, take a picture. But then at some point, kept fumbling around. I got to go. And I left. And then those guys followed me 30 seconds later. We all agreed that if something came up, we would always pick our own escape route. Like, when do you turn around? You have to make the call on yourself on, it's not smart to go any farther. I'd rather live and come back another day. I don't want to spend $10,000 on a helicopter to come pull me out the next day. Be smart about it. You can always do it again. I wasn't at that point, so I still had some good life left in me. I just had to shake out the lactic acid that was already there. So we continued on our march, made it through Phantom Ranch, where we decided to strip down because now it's warmer because the canyon is sheltering the wind. And it was, I don't know, a couple hours later. And so we took off jackets, took a 5-minute break, and Pat pulled out like a 5-pound bag of almonds and said, "Do you want some almonds?" I was just like, "Oh my God, why did you pack 5 pounds of almonds? Like, what are you thinking?" And then it kind of dawned on me. It's like, oh, he didn't do any of this part of the training, thinking about what food you're going to eat. He just went to Costco and put something in there. So I was like, nope, I'm good. And he's like, I got to go to the bathroom. I'm like, well, good luck with that. You know where we're going. There's only one trail. Catch up to us. And that was always kind of the plan. There is no cell service in the canyon. There's no texting. Your phones kind of go silent. So Nate and I took off. And Nate was a little bit of a faster hiker than I was. He just walked faster. And so he would stop at a certain point, change his socks. So I would pass him. Then we'd leapfrog back and forth. And at some point, he got ahead of me pretty far. And I decided, it's like, well, it's more fun if I can walk with him. So I'll just jog and catch up to him. And so after about 2 minutes of jogging, I decided, like, okay, I'm taking myself out of my own game plan.
6 front pockets and pouches, an insulated hydration compartment, and now, many successful rim-to-rims completed to rave reviews. Our 22-liter rim-to-rim pack is the day pack designed with the rim-to-rim hiker in mind. Check it out today and find out why it's been called Backpack Perfection. The unisex, one-size-fits-most rim-to-rim pack is available exclusively at brightangeloutfitters.com and is part of our mission to help you hike your best hike.
Like, you didn't train to run, you trained to walk. And this running, if you continue on this course, this is gonna have an effect later on that I didn't train for, and I don't want that. So go back into your own game plan, continue to walk the pace you've always walked, the way you've always trained, and let him go. So we wandered through the canyon. When it got bright, it was beautiful. It was epic scenery, and so you'd take pictures along the way wherever you could. You make the water stops wherever the water was on. The water is always a constant problem because it's so unpredictable. Pipes break all the time. You never know what water is going to be on or off. Do you have to go to the river and filter water, or what's going to happen? You just don't know until the day before, where they have a pretty good accounting of, like, water is on in these locations, and you can plan accordingly. Luckily, we had water on in a lot of places. So we made it towards the other side of the canyon. And it just seems like it takes forever to get up to the north rim. And as I was just about there, I see Nate coming back down. And I was like, wait, you didn't even wait for me? He's like, it's only 50 yards up this way. I'm like, you could have waited for me to get there. And he's like, no, I was getting cold. I got to go back. And he said, hey, your Pat texted, he's turning back. because that stuff shows up on the other rim. You start getting text messages again. And so we're like, okay, good. He's safe. He's going to head back. He doesn't know. Like,
and this wasn't a surprise to either one of you.
No, because I saw the numbers on how he had trained, and it wasn't a surprise. But I didn't want him to get hurt. I didn't want him to get rescued. So I suspected he would turn back, and he did, which was the smart move for him. So I spent, I think, 30 minutes at the North Rim. Got water, changed my socks, ate a sandwich. Talked to it. There's a lot of other people there who had just hiked up from campgrounds. And the North Rim is closed, so it was a desert land up there. There's nobody up there except the people who had hiked up. There was snow all over the place. It was really pretty.
Well, how are you feeling at this point? You're essentially halfway there. How's the body
feeling?
It feels... You've still got to turn around and go all the way back.
It feels good. It felt better after I ate. And so that was a good indication that it brought a lot of energy back after I ate a sandwich. So I'm like, okay, this is good. And now it's downhill for however many, 8,000 feet or whatever it's going to be. So that's good. Now I'm going downhill, which is a nice change of pace. And so I decided, like, okay, time to get going. Head downhill, and you run into other people along the way from everywhere else in the United States. So I met a couple of people from another place. They were going to do the rim to rim in a day. So you just kind of say hello and chat. You wind up seeing these people as you stop. They pass you, you pass them. So you see like small groups of people that you kind of form a quick bond with along the way. So my big hurdle was get down to Manzanita Rest House where they had water. It was like, okay, I'm going to fill up there. And you just kind of, it's your training kicks in of all the long walks kick in of like, yep, it seems kind of boring. It seems kind of treacherous and slow, but you just got to keep going if you want to get there. And so Manzanita Rest House was a big checkpoint for me where go to the bathroom, get water, change your socks, wash your face, time to get going. So the break is 5 minutes. And then look on my card, what's the next place? The next place is, 3 miles away. Cottonwood Campground, that was going to be the next place. So I wind up making it down. The one thing we did not want to do was we didn't want to be in a thing called the box, which is close to Phantom Ranch. There's a section of the canyon that acts like a convection oven when it gets hot. So the air temperature might be one thing, but in that canyon it could be 10 degrees hotter. And I didn't want to be there in the heat of the day. And that's exactly what was going to happen to me. It was starting to get hot. I'm sweating like crazy. My legs are starting to cramp a little bit because of electrolytes. And so, I would stop and get a bandana and wet my hat and put it over my head, which would create like an air conditioning cooling effect, which was good. But I had to make a decision. It's like I can either walk through that box when it's hot, or I have to stop and wait till the sun goes lower. And so I decided like that's the worst decision because my body would swell up and I don't want to do that. So I decided to push through. Little cramping in the legs, that hurt. I had to force myself to eat. I had to force myself to drink along the way because I didn't feel like it. The big hurdle was getting finally to the ranch. Finally made it there. The restaurants are closed, but everybody's out relaxing, eating awesome dinners. It smelled so good. I forced myself to sit down to eat my last sandwich, which I didn't want to do. I wasn't hungry. I didn't want it. But I forced down some water, knowing that I have to have this. And so once I left Phantom Ranch, it was probably 6 o'clock at night. Sun's still up, and I didn't see another person the entire trip. The entire way back, I didn't see a single soul. And I'm so glad I made my little map, because when you're walking by yourself and you see nobody, your brain starts playing tricks on you. And it's like, did I take the right trail? Am I going the right way? So there's a section when you cross the bridge that you basically walk downriver for, I think, a mile and a half. And then there's a rest house at that point. You make a left turn and then you start going up the canyon. So as I'm hiking down the canyon, my GPS wasn't really matching up with my total mileage because the GPS cuts out in the middle of the canyon. And so my numbers that I'm supposed to be seeing aren't registering. They're not in alignment. And so now it's messing with me with, maybe I should turn around and go this way, or maybe am I going on the right way? And so I decided to overrule all these numbers, follow the map. It's a right turn at the bridge. There's one trail. Stay on this trail. Don't freak yourself out. even though you keep walking, you've walked 3/4 of a mile, and you see no sign of this rest house yet, which is not a good sign. And then I'm reaching almost the 1.5 mile point where this rest house is, and I still don't see it. I'm like, okay, well, this is a problem. Turns out the rest house is just hitched up the canyon a little bit around the corner, and you won't see it until you reach that corner. And so once I hit that and saw the rest house, I was like, okay, great, I'm going the right way. The sun's starting to go down, so it's getting dark, and it's time to pull out the headlamp again. Now, this is a trail I've never walked, so it was just like, okay, stay on the trail, just stay focused on where you're going. Your next big thing is going to be Indian campgrounds. Make it to there. There's water there, and then there is no more water the rest of the trip. So, made it to Indian campground, forced myself to fill up and drink, forced a granola bar down, which I didn't feel like. I was starting to feel tired at that point, and it just kind of just like, keep pushing. You got to get out, keep pushing. So as I made it through Indian campgrounds, and you know, the switchbacks are endless on Bright Angel. You just keep going and going. And as I'm going, I look down on the trail, and there's like puke on the trail. I'm like, oh, somebody got sick right here. That's what this is. And I walk up a little farther to the next switchback, and there's, you know, somebody throwing up there too. And I was like, well, that's weird. Okay. At a certain point, I think I made it to the 3 mile rest house, so I'm getting closer to the top. And then my phone starts going crazy with messages and pings left and right. It just, like, I've never seen this happen. And out of the blue, I get a phone call from somebody who's at our camp. So we have like 8 people. This is a reunion for us for college. Those people who were at camp didn't know that Pat, Nate, and I were going to split up. And they thought we were going to stay together. And so I'm getting phone messages, and all of a sudden I'm talking to somebody on speakerphone from our camp, and they said, "Are you okay? Do you need rescue?" And I'm like, "No, I'm okay." They said, "Well, if you need a rescue, we'll come get you." And I said, "No, I'm okay. I'm just slow, but I'm okay. I'm tired, I'm hungry, but no, I don't need a rescue." And then you can hear them talking in the background, like, "Wow, he sounds way better than Nate did. He sounds better than Pat did." I was like, what happened to them? Like, because I haven't seen them the entire trip now. So what happened to those guys? And they said, "Oh, they're okay, they're okay." And I was like, all right, that didn't sound good, but.
So were they both out at that point?
Unknown. You know, I'm just in my own world. I don't know what's happening back there with those guys. And so I continued to hike, and I didn't find out until later, until I finally made it to the top. I think I made it to the top at 11:30 that night, where it's freezing cold. It turns out that Nate is back in the hotel room. Pat's back in the hotel room. Nate's getting an IV from Pat because Nate had a completely different story than I did coming up Bright Angel Trail, and so did Pat. So I'll switch back, and I'll go back to Pat, where he took a nap just a few miles after Cottonwood, like Rainbow Falls or something. He took a 2-hour nap, decided to turn around and go back. So Pat was trying to climb up Bright Angel Trail and started having like some really bad stomach issues where he started throwing up a lot. He was up high enough where he could call for help, and he called the camp, people at camp, to help him. He's like, "I need help, I can't get out." And so a couple of guys from our group came down, and they took Pat's pack off of him, and Pat was just walking with his poles. He'd walk 50 steps and he'd throw up. He'd walk 50 steps and throw up. And so they kind of just kept nursing him water and giving him stuff back so he wouldn't completely dehydrate. So Pat needed to be seriously helped out of the canyon by people in our group. And they managed to get him back to our camp. And since Pat's girlfriend was a nurse, she was going to give him an IV and kind of bring him back. But she couldn't. She said she had a hard time because his veins had collapsed at that point. So Pat was in trouble.
The Rim to Rim Hiking Club wants you. An entire collection of unique Grand Canyon hiking apparel, including our Rim to Rim Hiking Club tees and hoodies, is available exclusively at brightangeloutfitters.com. Commemorate your bucket list adventure by wearing your love of the canyon. From a full Rim to Rim collection to more specific landmarks like Uwah Point and Devil's Corkscrew, this is where you'll find something for those who are canyon obsessed. And yes, there's even a canyon obsessed design. Find it all at brightangeloutfitters.com. Bright Angel Outfitters was born out of a love of the canyon and exists to help you hike your best hike.
she basically gave him a IV through the neck or through the chest or something to kind of help him. So if you've never had an IV, you'd be so amazed at how quickly you're going to bounce back once you have one. So he bounced back, and then they were kind of waiting for Nate to make it up. And Nate was a couple hours ahead of me. Nate made it up to the top. He made it to the hotel, which was 100 yards from Bright Angel. He tried to check in, and the guy was in. Oh, Nate said he had problems in Bright Angel, whereas he had elevated respiration. His heart was beating like crazy, and he's hyperventilating. And he was like, "This is not normal. This is a problem for me, and I can't control my heart rate or my breathing." Nate said that he also saw a lot of other people on the trail that were stranded. And these are people that have walked down from Grand Canyon Village as sightseers, and they don't realize how hard it is to get out. And so they come down, even though there's all these signs saying, don't proceed unless you're in shape, signs of people throwing up. And so he just saw people on the trail everywhere. And so he would check on them. He's like, "Are you okay?" And people were just in rough shape. They'd be like, "Yeah, I'm okay, but I can't get out." And then you'd see a line of headlamps coming down the trail of family members coming to get these people. And so Nate had to step over a couple of people and then managed to get his way out, made it to the hotel, checked in, and when they told him, "This is where your room is, you go over here," Nate realized that he couldn't process that information at that point. Like, he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know where this room is. And so he called Pat and said, "I need help. I'm in the lobby of this hotel. I need help." And so Nate just kind of sat in the middle of the lobby until Pat and his girlfriend got there. And then they showed him because Pat's feeling better by this time, showed him where the room was, and then hooked him up with the IV. And so when I made my way to the top, I got there, I texted people that I'm safe. I made it because now I have reception. And I started walking towards the hotel. Had to kind of call and say, "I don't know where the room is. I don't know how to get there because I saw this in the light and now it's dark. I'm kind of confused." Anyway, made it to the room. When I walk in, I see Nate laying on the bed with the IV, and he's looking happy as ever. Pat looks like he's fine. I don't know any of these stories at this point in this journey, and it's not until I'm sitting there with my own IV that Nate starts telling me his story of what he found coming up the trail. And then we didn't hear the story of Pat until later, like everything that happened to him. So we all had very different experiences, very different training methods, but it wound up being really positive for everybody. Everybody loved it. We all had a good time. So Nate and I think took 4 bags of an IV to really fully replenish our system because we had been so dehydrated. Even though I felt like I was completely prepared and forced water down, it wasn't enough. And I felt okay. I didn't lose any mental capacity. I was just pretty worn out and pretty tired. Whereas Nate had some respiratory problems with hyperventilating. Pat's body just shut down and needed help. So in the end, everybody made it out safe. Everybody had a great experience. And we exchanged these stories later for a long time. So it wound up being really cool.
So looking back on it, what do you think is the biggest thing that you learned about the canyon and about yourself?
That my training does work. Believe in my own body and listen to my own body. That was always kind of the game plan. Something that I never had to deal with was the mental aspect of the mind games your body will play on you. Like, is this the right trail? Am I going the right way? Because that starts inducing panic of like, oh my gosh, I'm alone. I don't see anybody else. What am I going to do? How am I going to get out? And then you have to kind of shut that stuff down, realizing that no, you have a map, you know where you are, you know you're in the right direction. You have to just keep going and believe that you're on the right path and just trust yourself at that point. If you've done the homework and the research, your mind will try and talk you out of it, and I wasn't prepared for that. That was the tough part for the whole thing. Getting out, I was okay. I was just really tired. My feet really hurt. My legs really hurt. So it was funny. The next day we were all meeting for breakfast, and I was waiting for people to get there. And a couple people got out of a cab. 2 guys got out of a cab, and they were hobbling up the stairs and hobbling down the sidewalk to the restaurant. I started laughing at them, and they looked at me. I'm like, I know exactly what you guys did yesterday, because your feet hurt like that, and that's how my feet hurt yesterday. So they said, yeah, we just did rim to rim to rim. I said, yeah, I know that walk. So
the Canyon Shuffle, baby.
everybody has it. Yeah. They said, well, how long does it take to recover? And I said, well, we had an IV, so we're looking at probably 2 days. You guys are looking at a week or two before you can get fully back to normal.
How much of a part of you being able to have the success in the Canyon that you did do you attribute to having such a simple, easy to follow training method that centers on spending time on your feet more than anything else?
Well, I think that was everything. So I attribute a running background and how to train. I attribute my outrigger canoe background hugely, because what I learned from my training is don't do anything new on race day. And the Canyon hike was race day for me. So it's like, don't try that new pack, don't wear new shoes, don't eat new food, do the same thing you've always done. Because the minute you start changing variables, you don't know the outcome. And outcome could be good or it could be really bad. Don't wear a different hat. Nothing is new on that day. Keep it all the same. It doesn't matter how much you want to or learned a new thing of like, oh, this guy eats these gummy bears when he goes. It's like, don't do it unless you've done it in training. That's the biggest thing that I stuck to with the whole thing. So believe in yourself, the training works, you put in the mile. I put in like 550 miles on my feet before I went. I walked through my first pair of shoes and had to buy another pair of shoes before the Canyon. So I knew that I had the distance and I knew that I've hiked this far. Haven't been up for 24 hours before doing something physical. Like 15 hours was the longest I had walked. So that was kind of new. But if I had the mileage behind me, I knew it was going to be okay. And then you're ready for whatever else you didn't plan on to show up and happen and how to deal with that. So the isolation and loneliness on that hike, I had some of that because all my hikes were by myself, but being in the foreign environment where you have a cliff on one side and a ledge on the other, that was different for me. Like, I'm not going to get hurt walking on the beach, but I can get hurt if I lose my focus on the switchbacks. Because remember, there's no moon. It's pitch black. All you have is your headlamp. There's no moon silhouette of anything. So that was kind of an eerie part of like, you really need to pay attention here, because if you wander off mentally, it could be a serious mistake.
You gonna come back and do it again someday?
Would I do it again? Rim to rim, yeah. Rim to rim to rim, I don't know if it'd be worth it. Just because of the toll it took, at almost 60. There are other things to do besides that.
Yeah, you got oceans to cross, man.
Yeah, I do. I have I might go race in Brazil next year. That's my plan. So I'm training for that.
And you just know that what he just said, training for that, means a plan that's smart, simple, and well thought out, just like it was for the Grand Canyon. That was Brad Gill with just an exceptional approach to hiking the canyon. By the way, Nate finished in 20 hours, Brad was at 22, and Pat, of course, turned around at Ribbon Falls. Absolutely no shame in that. If you're not feeling it, that is a very, very smart decision. Now, we always say that taking on big hikes below the rim requires so much research, so much preparation if you want to have your best experience. And the plan Brad just laid out for us, it really exemplifies that approach. It just cannot be said enough. Take the canyon very, very seriously. Doesn't matter if it's a rim to rim, a rim to rim to rim, a rim to river, whatever it is, the canyon has the ability to chew you up and spit you out if you're not careful. It is a ruthless environment, and hiking it, no matter how prepared you are, is still going to reveal things that you never even thought about. You heard that happen to Brad several times during that story, so please, please, please be as prepared as you possibly can. All right, the link to Brad's plan is available in the show notes of this episode. With Brad's blessing, you are welcome to download it. There are plans that he pulled from that you're going to see, and the actual plan that he used. Well worth checking out. There's also a packing list. Brad shows you exactly the gear and supplies he carried. That's always one of the biggest questions that we get. What do you pack? So it is always useful to see what others are taking to give you some ideas on what might work for you. Man, what an episode. So much useful information, and we are so grateful to Brad Gill for taking the time to share. Brad, thank you so very much from all of us. All right, folks, this is a good time to remind you of all the resources we make available to you free of charge here at Bright Angel Outfitters. When we say over and over and over again that we exist to help you have the best possible experience below the rim, we mean it. It starts, of course, with this podcast. I think we're up to 24 episodes now, and a new one is out each Wednesday. The show really seems to be resonating, and that means the absolute world to us. If you could, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your platform of choice. That really helps us reach new listeners and helps ensure that we'll keep doing this for a long time to come. There's also a Grand Canyon Hiker Dude YouTube channel with tons of useful videos that you should go check out. The Grand Canyon Shade Tracker, which lets you see when and where you'll have shade on your hike any time of any day of the year. It is incredible. It is a must for the warmer months. And now, our Beginner's Guide to Rim ebook. Yeah, first time talking about that. We have just finished it and just made it available on our website, brightangeloutfitters.com. Again, absolutely free of charge. For all of that, please go. Again, brightangeloutfitters.com. While you're there, please check out the Rim to Rim pack, the day pack we talked about in the beginning that we designed for any canyon day hike. It's 22 liters. It's good for anything up to rim to rim to rim. We think it is a work of art. Yeah, we like it. Again, all of that at brightangeloutfitters.com. At Bright Angel Outfitters, we do it all for the love of the canyon. All right, that's it for now. My name is Brian Special, encouraging you, as always, to go hike the canyon. Take that first step. Embrace the journey. And when you get there, whether it's for time goals or taking your time, just hike your own hike and enjoy all that is the pure majesty of the Grand Canyon, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. We'll see you next time on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, presented by Bright Angel Outfitters.